So my name is Russ Derry, and I am the Director of Education at Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan, and I'll be moderating tonight's Learn and Share conference call. The topic is Public Benefits and Supports for Adults with Epilepsy, and our guest speaker tonight is Tom Kendziorski, who's the Executive Director of the ARC of Oakland County. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. So can you briefly introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background and interests and describe your experience with this topic?
Well, outside of patting myself on the back here, I've been at the ARC here for 35 and a half years. I am an attorney, although I don't have a private practice. I have two brothers. I had three, but one died. Two brothers with developmental disabilities, living in group homes, of which I'm guardian of each of them. I am a retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral, in case anybody cares. I like long-distance running, and I've used that to raise money for the ARC. It's a real nice way to do that. And I have primary expertise in special education law, governmental financial benefits, estate planning, which includes power of attorney and guardianship and those sort of things, and knowledge of how to navigate the mental health system. And I've been author of an income tax guide for the past 34 years, and it's free on our website.
Great. Well, we are going to be exploring every aspect of that experience tonight because we're going to cover a very broad range of topics. So, to the degree to which adults with epilepsy are able to participate in their communities really depends on a number of factors. That includes the frequency and severity of their seizures, the presence of other health conditions or disabilities, the amount and types of social and family support available, and also the types of government-funded benefits and supports available. Typically, those with well-controlled seizures and no other significant disabilities are able to find employment and participate fully in their communities. For all others, though, there may be challenges in meeting their social, financial, residential, and daily living needs. In such cases, meeting these needs often requires a complicated collection of supports from family and friends and publicly funded programs. So the goal of tonight's call really is to review the many public supports and benefits that can help adults with epilepsy to maximize their independence and community participation. So let's start by talking about the community mental health system. Can you describe how the system is organized, how it's funded, who's eligible, and then what types of services and supports are available?
Sure, that's not a problem. As part of my introduction, I just want to make sure everybody knows I have one of my brothers does have lifelong, he's 58 years old, has lifelong seizure disorder, and so yeah, I'm quite familiar with all that and medicines and EEGs, and so that's also part of my background. But community mental health, across the state, the public mental health system is divided into what are known as community mental health agencies. Some are authorities, some are not authorities. It's just a legal structure, but that's the entity that controls the delivery of public mental health services by way of Medicaid primarily. Here in Oakland County, ours is known as Oakland Community Health Network. Kent is Network 180, and some have different names than, say, just a community mental health. But the structure here in Oakland County is the Board of Directors for the Community Health Network, or OCHN, as they call it, OCHN. It's appointed by the Board of Commissioners, the elected Board of Commissioners, and they hire the CEO, and then the CEO hires staff. Our community mental health agency divides services into two parts, the developmental disability side and then the mental illness side, and have various provider agencies that actually provide the services. There's also services to emotionally disturbed children, substance abuse disorders, and rounding that out is the autism services, the applied behavioral analysis, primarily to children, and that's come up over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. But again, it's the delivery of public mental health services is through that agency. And somebody's going to get me on the number. I think there are 46 community mental health across the state, and they're further attached to what are known as prepaid inpatient health plans. There's 10 of those across the state. Here in Oakland and Macomb and Wayne, the PIHP and the CMH are the same. So that's relative to the structure.
Okay. And you mentioned the different categories of people that receive services through CMH. Can you talk a little bit more about who would be eligible under those definitions?
Well, the eligibility begins with Medicaid, whether it's children's services or adult services. Without Medicaid, most community mental health agencies nowadays are not going to provide services. Medicaid is the funding source. Most of the mental health CMHs don't receive a lot of general fund dollars, that is non-Medicaid dollars, to pay for services to those like it traditionally has in the past. Here in Oakland County, we were dramatically reduced from, say, $35 million a year in general funds to about $12 million. Anyway, Medicaid is the first eligibility thing that is looked at. Of course, in mental health, on the developmental disability side, you have to have a developmental disability that meets the criteria of the Michigan Mental Health Code. All of these services are by way of the Michigan Mental Health Code, whether you have mental illness, emotional disturbance, or developmental disabilities. The types and services that are offered, employment services, okay, to adults, housing support for adults, integrated health care, which is more like physical health. Here in Oakland County, we do have a judicial system support for those who are offenders. We work with the local county jail. And there's also case management and support coordination, or social work.
Okay. In terms of the definition of developmental disability that CMH uses, I know many people with epilepsy are kind of on the borderline between qualifying and not. So can you talk a little bit more about how CMH defines developmental disability?
Sure. Yeah, Russ, the definition is actually in the Mental Health Code.
Okay.
And those of you who are interested, I can give you the chapter and verse, but it's in the Mental Health Code. And essentially it says that the developmental disability, where there are 4 major ones, has to occur prior to age 22. And that's pretty much a federal and state legal definition of developmental disability. So the epilepsy, in this case, would have to occur prior to age 22. That would be one of the physical impairments as opposed to a mental impairment. But traditionally, the Mental Health Code defines developmental disability as intellectual impairment. Those of you who are old like me will remember the words mental retardation, which, of course, we don't use anymore. So intellectual impairment, autism, epilepsy, and cerebral palsy, those are the 4 major developmental disabilities. Further defining that, in order, under either of those developmental disabilities, the individual has to demonstrate substantial functional limitations. And those are words right out of the Mental Health Code, and there are 7 areas. The 7 areas are, they have to have a substantial functional limitation in the area of self-care, hygiene, taking care of themselves, brushing teeth, bathrooming. Self-direction is number 2, and that's where you're making judgments, say 5 years, what are you going to be doing? Are you substantially limited in that area? 3rd would be receptive and expressive language, pretty obvious. Capacity for independent living is 4th. Learning is 5th. 6th is economic self-sufficiency. Can you support yourself? And then 7th would be mobility. Now, typically, in order to be eligible for mental health services through the community mental health system, you have to be able to demonstrate 3 of those 7 areas in order to be defined eligible for services.
Okay, yeah, and I could certainly think of, just listening to those even if a person with epilepsy does not have an intellectual disability per se, could still have some challenges with self-direction, in capacity for independent living, and economic self-sufficiency. Those are kind of the ones that stand out as most likely to apply for people with epilepsy. So thank you for that clarification. And how about the definition of mental illness? Would depression and anxiety disorders, which are common in people with epilepsy, qualify as serious enough mental illnesses to make one eligible?
Well, I think so, because if you look right at, again, use the mental health code as your guide, and yes, I'm a mental health code geek, so I carry one with me at all times. There's definitions, and there is a definition for serious mental illness. There's a definition for serious emotional disturbance. The one for mental illness, if I could just, I'll read it. I don't know this from memory, but it's a diagnosable mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder affecting an adult that exists or has existed during the past year, meets diagnostic criteria, and substantially interferes with or limits one or more major life activities. It includes dementia with delusions, depressed mood, behavioral disturbance, or other forms of, so it includes dementia, but it would also include the ones that you mentioned.
Okay.
Someone has bipolar, someone is schizophrenic. Yes, it would include that.
Great. Okay, so can you discuss person-centered planning and self-determination, what those terms mean, and how they should be used as guiding principles in the delivery of care through community mental health?
The person-centered plan or planning process, or I'll just say PCP for short. Those of you who know about special education, the annual meeting to develop a plan is called the IEP, the Individual Education Plan. Well, in the mental health field, corollary to that is the person-centered plan. It's at the heart of delivery of services. The Michigan Mental Health Code requires person-centered planning. How novel. You know, we need to keep the person in mind when we're talking about what services that person is going to receive and at what levels and all that. But it's a process for planning and supporting the individual who's receiving those services and honors that individual's preferences, choices, and abilities. It's supposed to be practiced that way, the PCP process, but sometimes it just turns into, here's what we got and here's what you're going to get. If it turns out to be that, that's not person-centered planning. But person-centered planning is supposed to involve families, friends, professionals, and the individual's desires and requirements. But again, it's at the heart of delivery of services.
Okay, and self-determination is another term.
If I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Russ, the person-centered plan is what drives the amount of services, which of course drives the funding that's attached to that particular individual for a given year. Typically, the PCP is for a year.
Right.
And it's reviewed, and new goals and objectives and all those things are brought up. Okay, self-determination.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, self-determination is not really considered a program or a service. It's a concept. It's a delivery methodology, if you will. But self-determination is, again, along with person-centeredness, we want the individual to determine how they use the services. The basis, again, is in the Michigan Mental Health Code, and it's also in federal law, which is known as the Medicaid Managed Specialty Supports and Services, the 1915 BC Waiver program. So it's in state and federal law. Self-determination incorporates concepts and values that should be able to define what the person needs in terms of the life they seek. Should have access to meaningful choices. Choices is very important, and control over their lives, as opposed to the system telling you, here's what you're going to receive, here's what you're going to get, like it or not. Not everybody needs the same services. My brothers are not physically impaired. They don't need a PT, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, for instance. They don't have a psychiatric component, so we don't need a psychiatrist. But they do need a psychologist. They would need a nurse. Again, person-centered. The services and supports for people are not only person-centered but person-defined and controlled, and there are typically 4 principles under self-determination. That is freedom, next one's authority, support, and responsibility. Freedom is the ability of individuals to make choices about their life. Authority gives that person the control. And support is arranging for the resources and personnel that are going to provide those services. And responsibility, I mean, like everything, you have rights, but you also have responsibilities.
Right, right. Okay. So as you alluded to, certainly in my experience, and I'm sure in your experience with IEPs, for example, I've heard of situations where parents are given an IEP that's completed and they weren't even involved in the process, and I imagine...
Well, that's a big violation.
Yeah, it absolutely is, yeah, but we still surprisingly run across that. And I imagine the same is true for person-centered planning, that it's something that doesn't always exist. It doesn't always follow the true spirit of person-centered planning. So when that's not taking place as it should, what recourse do service recipients have?
Well, anyone who's receiving services under the Mental Health Code has the ability to file a formal complaint, typically through the Office of Recipient Rights. So ORR, the Office of Recipient Rights in your locality, you'd file a complaint alleging that there's been a violation of your person-centered plan. And they have ORR has a timeline to investigate. A rights investigator does that and comes up with either substantiated or not. That's what. A lot of other community mental health, like mine, will have something additional to that, a grievance system, a dispute resolution, something less than calling outright for a Medicaid fair hearing. So using the rights, the ORR, the recipient rights system, filing a complaint is one way. Using local dispute resolution, whatever it's called in your domain, or then you always have the right to go through the Department of Health and Human Services, the Medicaid fair hearing, where an administrative law judge hears both sides and makes a decision.
Okay. So another system of supports is the Aging and Adult Services Agency, which oversees 16 area agencies on aging. And as the name suggests, these agencies focus on services for older adults, but many of these services are also open to people with disabilities. Can you provide an overview of the funding mechanisms, eligibility guidelines, and supports associated with this system?
Well, sure. Typically, it's not the Area Agency on Aging, the other AAA, not the Automobile Association.
Right.
But here in southeastern Michigan, it's called the Area Agency on Aging 1B. So AAA 1B is in our area. And yes, it's traditionally for seniors, but it's also for caregivers and people with disabilities. A lot of the services that they provide, it's federal law, which is at the basis of the AAA, so they have to provide services to people with disabilities. They do information and information referral, Meals on Wheels. That's who does Meals on Wheels. Direct care services. So they know of care management, case management. They have adult day services, chore services to help seniors maintain their own homes. Home injury control. They do advocacy, transportation assistance, a wide variety of that sort of programming and services is what the Area Agency on Aging does. And again, it applies to seniors as well as people with disabilities. Typically, though, not typically, but if you're not eligible for, say, community mental health services because you're not developmentally disabled enough or mentally ill enough, the AAA is a good place to look for the same types of services. Worked with them in the past, and they're very accommodating and do know a lot about the developmental disability side of things.
Great. And in terms of financial eligibility, is it also a Medicaid-based program, or are people who don't have Medicaid eligible possibly?
You know, yeah, I'd like to say I'm expert in everything, but that's one thing I didn't look up. I'm not sure. But my gut is telling me that it's not a Medicaid-based services because of the federal funding that's there.
Right.
Especially with the My Choice waiver, that's for people who need more hands-on caregiving. Yep, you got me. I'll have to look that up.
No, but I think that your explanation does make sense. So, and I know at least, you know, some of the services there may be stricter eligibility requirements for some services, but I know anyone can access them for information referral and that type of support. So.
Well, if I could use it as a guideline, the Michigan Mental Health Code, if you don't have, say, supplemental security income or Social Security disability as a basis of your monies, can you still get mental health services under the Mental Health Code? Yes, but you would have an ability to pay based on your income and assets.
Okay, so you can access CMH services if you don't have Medicaid, but you would just have to pay additional funds.
Ability to pay based on your income and assets, yes.
Got it. Okay, you mentioned the My Choice Medicaid Waiver Program, which is administered through the area agencies on aging. How is that different from home help services, which is administered through the local Department of Health and Human Services offices?
Well, there are a lot of similarities, but the overriding reason, the My Choice, My as in MI, Michigan, get it? My Choice Medicaid Waiver. It's waiving the Medicaid laws that traditionally would only send money to a nursing home. What the My Choice Waiver, its biggest objective is to have people receive Medicaid-covered services like those provided by nursing homes, but in their own home or other residential settings. So that's what the My Choice Waiver is really all about. It takes those Medicaid dollars and puts them into the community for similar services, and it's for elderly and the disabled. You mentioned the Area Agency on Aging 1B. Do they administer the My Choice Waiver? Yes, they do. But also in this area, MORC, the Macomb Oakland Regional Center, which is a Developmental Disabilities organization headquartered in Clinton Township, Macomb County, it also administers a part of the My Choice Waiver.
Oh, okay.
So it's just not the AAA, right? Okay. But what kind of services? Well, transition, community living supports, nursing, respite, and there's a whole host. The adult home help services, or used to be, a lot of people call it chore services, that would be separate and distinct. That's, again, helping people go to the bathroom, eat, if they need help grooming, bathing, dressing, mobility, transferring, taking medications, and also shopping. Oh, I'm blanking. the big ones. Shopping and housework. Transportation is not included in adult home help. So usually it's the My Choice and the home help. It's going to work together. They're not going to both pay for the same thing.
Right.
So the Michigan or the My Choice Waiver is usually going to do more goals and objective hands-on things after it's the last, known as the last resort. So the home help dollars would be used first and then the My Choice Waiver. So it's used in concert.
Got it. Okay. So are there any circumstances in which someone can get funding for in-home supports when they don't need help with activities of daily living? So that's, the activities of daily living or ADLs includes eating, toileting, bathing, grooming, dressing, transferring, and mobility. So, for example, an adult with epilepsy who also has some problems with memory and executive function or organization or planning or those types of things might be able to live independently if he could get someone to come in for a few hours a week to help with things like managing finances and organization and taking medications, transportation for errands, and just simply checking in on for the purposes of general health and safety. That's kind of one of the biggest challenges of people, adults with epilepsy, is they may not need that full level of support with ADLs, but something close to that they would need in-home support. And I'm just wondering the extent to which those types of services might be covered.
Again, the My Choice waiver, the eligible adults have to meet income and asset criteria because it's Medicaid services, and Medicaid is an asset-based program. If individuals are trying to get those type of services, these type of services on their own, certainly private pay, it's expensive, but private pay is a way to achieve those sort of things. Would you like to talk about SSI and Social Security, income to perhaps pay for those things?
Sure. So, yeah, I guess I was just getting at, are there any other pockets of funding, I guess, or sources outside of income from Social Security disability benefits that could pay for those types of things that don't fall under that ADL? And it sounds like
outside of the Medicaid system, the My Choice, no, not at all. Okay. You're on your own with private pay, and that's going to be, ungodly expensive in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on then to Social Security disability benefits. Can you give kind of a basic overview of the two main programs, SSI and SSDI?
Sure. All right. Well, SSI, let's start there first. Everybody must remember or know that there are two disability benefit programs, two. Usually, most folks are going to start with what is known as SSI. Long words are Supplemental Security Income. SSI is a needs-based program. You have to be poor by definition and also have a disabling condition that does not allow you to work at competitive employment. There's a whole lot of little parts and detail that go into this, but competitive employment is doing the job that somebody else can do without any job coaching, day-to-day, minute-by-minute supervision. But SSI, needs-based benefit, a person, let's talk about adults, cannot have more than $2,000 to their name in liquid assets, period. I don't care how disabled you are or how many seizures you have, and you can't work. You cannot have more than $2,000. Once you get SSI, Medicaid is automatic in the state of Michigan. The maximum benefit, the full benefit, is $750 a month federal, and the state of Michigan puts in $14 a month, but it's paid quarterly, so $42. In order to be eligible for SSI from a medical point of view, you must meet medical disability criteria, and epilepsy has its own definition, just like intellectual impairment does, autism does, and so on. For seizures, they're going to require documentation of EEGs. Social Security is going to require, your neurologist to write a report, fill out a form. SSI is a very negative program, so the more seizures you have, even though you're taking medication, if it's uncontrolled, that's what they're looking at. Someone who would have seizures takes their particular medication and they're controlled, is probably not going to get SSI. If they have a high school diploma, if they're able to work, the ability to work is also looked at. So meeting the medical criteria is very important. And for seizures, it's how many seizures you have in a certain period of time, typically a week and a month you have to show, and medical documentation from the learned MDs in that area. Minor children do not receive SSI for the most part because their parents' income counts against them, so keep that in mind. Once they're 18, they become an economic family of one, so only their income, the individuals with disabilities' income and assets are looked at. If you're working, can you get SSI? Yes, but for every $2 you earn, gross income, $1 is taken away. The maximum you can earn under SSI each calendar month is right now $1,585. That's where you mathematically lose, you work yourself off of SSI. It is possible to work, but again, the higher you make in earnings, the less SSI you get. Right. So that's SSI in a nutshell.
Okay. And then SSDI?
The key thing is that automatic Medicaid. You don't have to fill out the god-awful 25-page form for Department of Health and Human Services to get that Medicaid.
Right.
Oh, so you've seen the form.
I haven't actually, but I've heard stories. So,
if you go online to fill one out, you'll be clicking away for at least a half an hour. It's that complex. Okay. The other disability money benefit is Social Security Disability Insurance, or SSDI. Now, that is an entitlement-based program based upon the worker who has paid into the Social Security system for X number of years. Typically, it's going to be 10 years worth of benefit, or 10 years worth of work, working quarters, 3-month periods. Wow, that's really in the weeds. But you've been paying into FICA for years. You can qualify for Social Security Disability based on your own work record, or if you don't have a work record, potentially, you could qualify for SSDI, Social Security Disability, as a DAC, a disabled adult child of an insured worker, your parents, one of your parents. If the parent is 62 or above, already on Social Security pension, or the parent is disabled, receiving their own disability through Social Security, or the parent is deceased. So there's really 4 ways for an adult with a disability to receive SSDI: through their own work record, through a parent, retired, disabled, or deceased. Automatic with Medicare, after being on the program for 2 years, is Medicare comes to that individual. Can you work and receive Social Security Disability? Absolutely. It's a pretty easy number. Again, very low, but you cannot gross earn per calendar month more than $1,180. Now, if you have blindness, then it's up to $1,970. So it is possible to work and still get Social Security Disability, and it's not a 2-for-1 takeaway. It's just a black and white $1,180. Okay.
Okay, great. That was a very, very clearly explained summary, so I appreciate that. So what are some
I could go on. I could go on and on and on.
So what are some important tips for getting approved and maintaining benefits, I guess?
From the beginning, whether you're applying for SSI and or Social Security Disability, documentation. Right. And I mean not, well, my pediatrician when I was 2 years old said, really irrelevant. It's what about today? In the case of epilepsy, that neurologist report is going to be golden. If you have a cognitive impairment, a psychological. If you have a psychiatric impairment, that meant the psychiatric report evaluation. Cerebral palsy, again, have the proper medical diagnosis and report. So the more medical documentation you can show, the better. If you apply and are denied, there is an appeal system through Social Security. And in Michigan, we go directly from the denial to the administrative law judge stage. And in the metropolitan area, typically when you're denied and you apply for a hearing, it's going to be 12 to 14 months before you'll have your hearing. And that's a long time, I know, but it's also a time when you can get those extra reports you need to beef up your the support for your disabling condition. A vocational evaluation, if it's through school or through Michigan Rehabilitation Services, a vocational evaluation that says this person only produces 25% of norm. Well, that's a good report that shows the individual cannot work. So document.
Right, right. And do you generally recommend for anyone who doesn't have a very clear-cut case of approval, do you generally recommend considering working with a Social Security disability lawyer or advocate who, one of the situations where you only pay if you get approved, that sort of thing?
Well, that is, and that last sentence is what Social Security demands. Yes, you really do need to get an attorney who knows Social Security backwards, forwards, and in between. The attorney cannot charge unless you win. That's a Social Security law. Oh, okay. Most private attorneys are not going to take your case because they're going to review it. They're going to assess it. And if they don't think you're going to be able to win, they're not going to take your case. They're going to spend a lot of time and effort and then lose anyway. You can do it alone. I don't recommend that, but again, document the daylights out of the medical documentation. There is possibility of lay advocates instead of attorneys who can do the same thing, basically getting all your medical stuff together and writing a brief and explaining to the judge why you cannot work.
Okay, great. Now, how does state disability assistance differ from SSI or SSDI, or how does it supplement it or complement it?
Well, disability assistance, you're speaking of through the Department of Health and Human Services, general assistance payments?
Yeah.
Those are a function of poverty, not disability. If you don't qualify for SSI, can you independently apply for Medicaid? Yes, you can, because Medicaid's administered through the state, so you'd apply online for Medicaid, and able-bodied people who are young and should be working, even though they are poor, are not going to they're not going to qualify for Medicaid. If you have a disabling condition, such as epilepsy, again, documented, and Medicaid will more than likely come to you. Even if you're working, an individual, the Medicaid comes in many forms other than regular Medicaid. There's one called Freedom to Work Medicaid, and that's where you're basically the working poor. You're earning, an individual earning under $15,600 a year would qualify for Medicaid because they're working and they have a disabling condition. If you earn a little bit more than that, the more you earn, the more your monthly premium is going to cost. So if you're making $40,000 a year or a month, then your premium is going, I'm sorry, I'm mixing up. If your annual income is, say, more than the $15,600, let's say it's $20,000, your premium's probably going to be $10 or $20 a month for Medicaid. Not too bad, but I say that not being one who earns that low of an income. So it is possible. The general assistance payments, again, are made as a function of poverty and not really looked at as a disability benefit.
Okay. So can you explain the ABLE Act and how it might benefit some adults with epilepsy?
I sure can. Okay, the ABLE Act, or otherwise known as the life experience. Darn, I just said it today. ABLE, it's an acronym. It's a savings account for people with disabilities under the Internal Revenue Code. Achieving a Better Life Experience. Wow, there we go. It's too late in the day. Achieving a Better Life Experience Act. ABLE, ABLE Act. And in Michigan, it's about 1.5 years old as an active program. And it's set up through the Internal Revenue Service. But the bottom line is people with disabilities, whether you're on SSI or not, it's open to anyone who became disabled prior to age 26. If your epilepsy started at age 40, ABLE Act isn't going to allow you to open up an account. So it has to happen prior to 26. And in Michigan, it's all done online through miable.org, MI as in Michigan, miable.org. It's pretty easy to set up an account. You're allowed to place up to $15,000 a year into that account. this comes in handy if you're on SSI and you want to save some money for that first house, for the first and last month's rent, for a huge dental bill. You can't save more than $2,000 under SSI. But with an ABLE Act, you can, because the first $100,000 that you put into an ABLE Act account will not affect your SSI. I would not recommend putting $100,000 or saving it over years, because there's a clawback clause, or what is known as an estate recovery clause. It's mandatory. You open up an ABLE Act account and you die, whatever's in that account, the state has first dibs on, up to whatever Medicaid is paid to that person during his lifetime. So you really want to think about putting more than too much money. Back to the SSI. As long as you have less than $100,000 in the ABLE Act account, your SSI will continue. And with Medicaid in Michigan, as long as you have less than $500,000 in your ABLE Act account, Medicaid will continue. I like to think of the ABLE Act savings account as a pressure relief, an economic pressure relief valve for individuals who want to save for a specific purpose. But ABLE Act savings account, you can use the money to pay your rent. You can use the money to buy groceries. You can use the money to pay for dental bills, go to higher education. So it can be used for just about anything. Eventually there will be an auditing system for it, and the man from the Michigan Department of Treasury that gives this speech a lot, he always says, as long as you're not using it for casinos, liquor stores, and strip clubs. I tell him stop saying strip clubs, but it gets a laugh. You cannot use it for superfluous things like that. Sure. Eventually you're going to be audited, and they could be prove how you spent the money. Best thing to do is document everything you spend your account on. But that's the ABLE Act.
Okay. How does one access that or start an account?
It's all done online through miable.org. Okay. And it's $45 a year to maintain the account, and you just have to basically start it with $10.
Okay.
And they issue a debit. They issue a debit card, and that's how you spend the money out of it.
Is there a way to access it if you don't have internet access? Or to start an account?
Great question, Russ. I've never had anybody ask me that. I have done I went to all kinds of seminars, and I really read up. I've never heard of it. There's no ability to do it without internet access.
Okay. Well, I mean, certainly you could go to your public library and
you can
apply there. So, all right. Now, for people with disabilities seeking employment, Michigan Rehabilitation Services can provide a variety of supports. How is eligibility for MRS or Michigan Rehabilitation Services determined, and what are some of the most common employment-related supports that MRS provides?
Yeah, eligibility for MRS or Michigan Rehab Services, and I've been to a lot of their presentations, and I say this just in a generic way. The disability definitions are looser, more flexible. Right. There's also a version of MRS that deals with those who are blind. It's not the same disability criteria, medical listings criteria for, say, SSI or Social Security disability. Someone who has epilepsy, is controlled by seizures, would be counted as eligible for MRS. Whereas for SSI, you're not going to get benefits typically with that sort of a situation. So it's flexible, and I think you go for it, and they'll usually help out. The kind of supports that are available are, oddly enough, vocational counseling. They're there to help a person with disability find employment and help with things that will get you that employment, like if you need driver training, specialized driver training. Yes, I know about epilepsy and driver's licenses and all that, but that's one example. Another is they'll send you on work assessment, work evaluation. The state will send you to an agency, and you go there for 3 weeks and get testing, but they'll also help you find a job. That's great. They'll do job assessment, assist finding employment, pay for things like driver's education, but also, and they will also do psychologicals in case there's an intellectual impairment there. But MRS also has a residential vocational training site. Think of it as a junior college, but it's the Michigan Career Training Institute. And it's located in Plainwell, Michigan, kind of south of Jackson, where you can, MRS sends you there and you can learn a trade, get certifications in, a guy one time, a pharmacy tech, he got a job afterwards, small engine repair, cosmetology, maintenance, but they have a lot of different, go to their website, Michigan Career Training Institute, and there's a lot of things that MRS could help pay for you. Yeah, it's basically job counseling and placement, and that's their key. If after a certain amount of time, and it varies, 6 months, 9 months, or maybe even 1 month, if that worker, the vocational counselor, does not believe that you're ever going to be competitively employed, they will issue you a letter and say so and terminate your services. So it's not a forever program.
Right, right. And just to clarify, I think it's called the Michigan Career Technical Institute.
Oh, I said training. I'm sorry.
Just in case anyone wanted to look that up. So yeah.
I wrote training, and I know it's technical. Jeez.
So now, in terms of funding so obviously some of the supports that they provide may involve directly funding something. Is there a specific? Do you know if there's any specific cap on how much funding can be spent on any individual client, or how that sort of thing is determined?
No, I've never heard of a cap on that. It's because they contract with psychologists, they contract with job assessors and all that.
So
no, I've never heard of a cap on funding. It's really to get the job done.
It's just need-based. It's if you need this type of service to get employment, then they're going to hopefully try and provide that.
Right. In that terminology, yes, need-based. So it's not needs-based. You don't have to be poor to go to MRS.
Right.
Michigan Rehab Services used to be the it's under the Vocational Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which essentially was to help returning veterans, disabled in war, seek vocational counseling and job assessment and employment, but it's morphed into more than just that.
Right. So as with many large agencies with multiple local offices, the amount and quality of services received through MRS often varies from office to office or even from counselor to counselor. What advice do you have for people who are not satisfied with the assistance that they're receiving?
As with any other administrative agencies, I mean, you try to do things in as local level as possible. If the vocational counselor assigned is maybe just not doing their job, you kind of speak to the supervisor. If not the supervisor, then the area manager. And they're all very approachable, at least that's been my experience. But like any other administrative agency, they do have administrative appeals where you can appeal it and have a hearing officer hear your case and their case and make a decision.
Okay.
In Oakland County, the offices that we have here, again, and not shilling, but again, I'm just telling the truth, over the years they've been outstanding with helping individuals.
Right. And you can, at least from what I've been told, you don't have to necessarily go to your local office. If there was another nearby office, you could choose to go there. Is that correct?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a state agency.
Yeah.
But if you want to travel in Oakland County, it's in Oak Park or Waterford. Little distance between those two.
Sure. Okay. Some adults with epilepsy live alone and don't need any special supports, and some live with family members who act as caregivers. Many others, however, either need or want to live separately from family members and need some sort of financial assistance and other supports to do so. Can you discuss some of the different types of residential options for people with disabilities, and any government benefits and supports that can help people find and maintain a new living situation.
Yeah, I have 3 examples outside of paying for everything yourself, but if you are part of the public mental health system, the community mental health system, residential is a big part of a big service that that agency does provide. The more dependent you are, the more staff you need and all that, those residential services are through, again, Medicaid funding. If you don't happen to have that, or you're independent enough, apartment hunting is an option. Here in Oakland County, I know I'm being provincial, but in Oakland County we have the Community Housing Network. It's a nonprofit agency here in Troy that will, they have monthly meetings, but they also have counselors that will work with the individual to match them up with other people looking for roommates, housemates, apartment mates, that kind of thing, to share expenses. That's a possibility. The only financial help that's available now in certain markets, you can't even get on a waiting list because they closed it a long time ago, but what is known as the Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, the federal government, Section 8 rent subsidy through that agency. It's administered locally by housing authorities and a lot of municipalities, not all, but many municipalities have housing authorities, and they're typically running those Section 8 rent subsidy programs. It doesn't mean you have to live in a high-rise senior's apartment type of setting, but as long as your landlord is willing to take the federal government giving basically 3/4 of your rent, paid through the federal government, and you pay the other 3/4 or other quarter. That's how Section 8 rent subsidy. You pick your own apartment, and your landlord has to be a provider along with that Section 8 program. Okay. Outside of that, Medicaid doesn't provide rent subsidies. No. Okay. Neither does community mental health, because they're all Medicaid based, so they don't either.
Okay. Can you explain group homes a little more as an option, and kind of the different variations of group home or of adult foster homes, or if I'm forgetting the terminology of that, but
yeah, adult foster care home, or AFC, adult foster care, is typically your licensed group home in the community, in a neighborhood. Usually it's 6 people. There are larger ones with 30 people that I know of, and congregate living facilities and all that, but typically it's 6 people, 4 to 6 individuals. There are ones outside of the community mental health system. They're privately run, and they are still adult foster care licensed, and you have to pay whatever they want to charge. In Oakland County, those kind of homes are looking at $1,500 a month. Kind of high if all you have is $750 coming in from SSI. The bulk of the adult foster care homes are run through the public mental health system, and it's required that you pay a certain amount of you get more SSI if living in a licensed group home, and other than $44, the rest of it goes to that house to keep it going. There are homes that are not licensed homes. They're, oddly enough, unlicensed homes. We call those personal residences. It's where usually 3 people get together, sharing the costs, and not only the rent, but the utilities and food and all that. And the individual might qualify for food stamps to help that out. They might qualify for home help services to help pay for staff. Again, it comes down to cost. If you're in Oakland County, you're a high-cost area. It gets a little challenging in that respect.
Okay. So planning for a secure future for a loved one with epilepsy or another disability, things like guardianship or estate planning, could be obviously a topic of a whole separate conference call, but without going into too much detail, can you highlight some of the most important considerations when starting to plan for the future and some key resources that might be able to help with that?
Okay. Well, some people are looking, guardianship would be applicable to them. Others who are higher functioning or, their normal intelligence, that sort of thing, and they need help making decisions, a power of attorney, which is not a court document where a guardianship is. A power of attorney would be helpful in helping make decisions for an individual. But individual who needs help with their Social Security monies, then they're appointed a representative payee to help. Always want to pick somebody who has your best interest at heart. When it comes to wills and trusts, usually this is where parents are deciding how to plan their estate. If one of their children has a disability, can't handle monies, then they would do well to write up what is known as a special needs trust. And that's leaving money to somebody with disability who cannot handle it on their own. And a trustee is set up to take care of those monies. And also to retain eligibility for SSI and Medicaid and the public mental health system. Again, special needs trust is to supplement governmental benefits, not to supplant or take the place of those governmental benefits. SSI and Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare first, and then, well, what can the special needs trust be used for? It can be used to buy that extra warm winter coat, go on vacation. The trust can own a house that the individual lives in, pays modest rent that way. But that's where a lawyer has to get involved to draw up a special needs trust. Parents can do that. Usually that's how it happens. Or the individual with disabilities who wants to put all their money irrevocably into the trust so they can qualify for Medicaid, they can do that as well.
Okay.
So estate planning is very, very crucial for the parents and the individuals.
Right. And I guess how does an ABLE account compare to like a special needs trust?
Well, the ABLE, great question, thanks. The ABLE account, again, you can only put up to $15,000 a year into it. A special needs trust, you can put anything you want into it, or the parents can, so there's no dollar amount there. The special needs trust can invest in anything it wants to. With an ABLE Act, you're limited to a couple of fidelity accounts and maybe a savings account, depending on your choice, and that's it. The special needs trust, if the parents are writing it, after they're gone, it funds it, then the special needs trust, after that individual with disability dies, the money can go to other family members or fine upstanding charities like my own, or your own, sorry, Russ. But the ABLE Act has that clawback clause, which has to go to the state first, up to what Medicaid is paid in. Those are kind of like the differences between each. A special needs trust has a trustee that takes care of the money. An ABLE Act account, there is no such thing. It's the person with disabilities. And if you got somebody who wants to spend money and go to Las Vegas, technically they could. Well, that's not good if those monies are supposed to be for other purposes.
Right. Now, is money in a special needs trust, does that affect then your SSI or SSDI payments?
Absolutely not.
It doesn't.
And
okay.
And we're never talking about Social Security disability. Those are not assets. You can have $1 billion in a special needs trust, but it's SSI and Medicaid, those needs-based $2,000 asset. Yeah. So any of the money in a properly written special needs trust does not count as an asset. The trust owns the money, not the individual with special needs.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Well, we got through that fairly quickly. I'm surprised. So before we open it up for questions, do you have any closing thoughts for our listeners? And then after that, we can open it up for questions.
Well, sure. I don't want to put a plug in necessarily, but there are attorneys who, in private practice, do this estate planning for a living. So if you're interested in that special needs trust, you're the individual with special needs, and in order to qualify for Medicaid, you got to put money away. There are attorneys, and I can make referrals to them, make referral for you to them to call. but don't yell at me when you find out how much they charge. But they're experts in their field, and this is all they do.
Okay. And did you want to share your website, the ARC of Oakland County's website and phone number too, just because I know people may want to contact you or contact the organization to get more individualized assistance if they live in Oakland County?
Right. The ARC of Oakland County is, again, one of 25 chapters across the state. Wayne County has 6 of them, and Macomb has 1, and there's other chapters throughout the state, but they may not have an attorney there who can do all the stuff I do. But our website is, of course, www.thearcoakland.org, THEARCOAKLAND.org. And we got a professionally done website, and a lot of my PowerPoint presentations. I give these speeches all the time on planning a more secure future, wills and trusts, guardianship and the alternatives, the ABLE Act. I've got a PowerPoint up about that. I even have an income tax guide that I mentioned earlier. It's all free on our website.
Great.
And here in Troy, the best thing to do is to call if you're in Oakland County, 248-816-1900, and call in, set up an appointment to come in and talk. We don't charge a fee for our services. I'd love you to become a member, and it's $55 a year to become a member of the ARC and receive our newsletter and all that sort of thing.
Great, great. All right, so let's go ahead and open it up for questions. All right, so who would like to get us started with a question? Again, just dial *6 to unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question.
Hi, this is Susie Eggers.
Hi.
And I do have one question that I just wanted to clear up for my own clarification. You were talking about the My Choice waiver.
Yes.
Is that the same thing as the Rehabilitation Supports waiver?
No, not at all. They're
okay.
two separate waivers. Okay. It gets into the Medicaid laws and regulations, but no, My Choice waiver is different than the adult rehabilitation waiver, which is different than the children's waiver.
Okay, so the My Choice is for the children.
No. My Choice is for typically seniors and also very involved physically, developmentally disabled. That's been my experience.
That would be my son.
Yes, and
do
you live in Oakland County? I recognize your name, I think. Do you live in Oakland County?
No, I live in Lapeer County.
Oh, Lapeer, okay. Well, Mark, the Macomb Oakland Regional Center also runs a My Choice here, but I'm not sure who does it in Lapeer.
Okay.
But the Area Agency on Aging up there would probably run it as well. It's the same program.
Okay. The same program as the Rehabilitation Supports?
No. The My Choice waiver program here in Oakland through the Area Agency on Aging, whatever the counterpart in Lapeer is, it's still My Choice.
Okay.
It's a federal program. But the rehabilitation waiver is typically through the community mental health.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder how come that's not been mentioned all these years, but I guess I could ask. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, there's additional criteria for the My Choice waiver, and the people that I know that I work through here at the ARC, we're talking about tube-fed, suctioned, need 24 services. They're not in group homes, but a lot of nursing goes into the house, again, to keep them out of nursing homes. So nursing help, there's a lot of different services that come.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like the Rehabilitation Support.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. Yeah, you can get nursing help through a HAB waiver. My brothers are both on HAB waivers through their group homes.
Yeah. Okay, very good. I'm all set.
Okay, great.
Okay. And is the Rehabilitation Supports go ahead. I actually, just a second. If the Rehabilitation Supports waiver, is that just sort of a funding or a pocket of funding within the community mental health system, or how does that work?
But sure, there are regular community living supports funding stream, but if you're under the mental health system, the rehabilitation waiver, the Medicaid, is it's a point system. So the more dependent you are, the higher the points, the more likely you're going to get a habilitation waiver.
Got it.
And it pretty much brings a few more services in that the regular community living supports through Medicaid don't.
Okay, great. Okay, someone else had a question. A gentleman, go ahead.
Russ, this is Greg. How you doing?
Good.
What was that type of trust you were talking about?
Well, the type of trust is, most people in the business would call it a special needs trust.
Okay. Now, what's the difference? And what's the difference between that and a trust agreement? Can you tell me?
Well, the trust agreement is the actual document that sets up a trust. The lawyer draws up the trust, and it is an agreement between the grantors, the people who are making that trust, and the trustees.
Well, see, my mother appointed a trustee, but the guy didn't know nothing about being one for about 2 years.
Yikes.
After she died. The trustee is supposed to pay taxes and insurance on the place.
Well, the trustee administers the funds within the trust. So if there's a house involved in that trust, the answer is yes. That trustee is, I'm a trustee for a number of trusts, and I make sure the taxes are paid and the house is taken care of and rents are collected.
Yeah.
I'm a landlord.
Yeah, well, this guy, he thought, he said it's going to be so easy to be a trustee, but then, for 2 years he didn't know nothing about being one.
Well, you got to make sure the physical plant's there, but also that the individual who's got the special needs is being taken care of. So there's some additional duties for the trustee. Yes. Yeah,
and then you said if you're on SSD, you're allowed to make over $1,180 a month.
In order to keep your benefits, your Social Security disability benefits, the maximum monthly gross earnings cannot be more than $1,180. Correct.
Okay, but then how much are you allowed to keep in the bank for yourself?
Under Social Security disability, there is no asset limit. None.
There's no asset limit for what's in the bank, huh?
With Social Security disability, no. With Medicare, no. Now, do you have Medicaid as well?
I don't think no. I don't have Medicaid. I got
all right.
I got the Aetna Health now. Is what I got.
Okay. Well, yeah. There's no asset limit for Medicare or Social Security disability.
There's no there's no asset limit to what's in the bank. But I've been told. But I was told that I was only allowed about $2,000 in the bank, and that's it.
That is if you are getting what is known as SSI, Supplemental Security Income.
I was on SSI up until 1984, I found out, and then it changed to SSD.
Well, no. So SSD, there is no asset limit, and the Medicare that you have, there's no asset limit. Correct.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Okay. Other questions?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. My name is Kim, and I have a question. I have, uncontrolled or non-epileptic seizures, and I have, a severe case of conversion disorder where my ADLs are affected, so I need, a chore provider. And I have documentation from different neurologists and everything. I've turned that in, and I've been denied, 3 times, and I've called Valley Area of Aging, and they said because I'm on SSI and not SSDI, I'm not able to get it.
Really?
They don't recognize you as the...
Not able to get what?
The chore provider, you got to be recognized as disabled by the state. They said the SSDI recognizes you disabled by the state, but SSI does not recognize you as disabled by the state.
I'm a little confused because SSI, I'm just working through this, so help me out here, but SSI and Social Security disability use the exact same medical criteria to determine disabling condition or illness. Okay? So if you're disabled for Social Security disability, you're disabled for SSI. The state of Michigan uses those definitions for any of their disability programs.
There's no asset limit without in the bank, so I had a good one.
Well, I'm on SSI, and I've applied and been denied like 3 times, so I put it in with for the chore provider, I mean.
For chore. All right, so with your SSI, you have automatic Medicaid. Medicaid is what you need in order, Medicaid's what you need in order to get chore services, the adult home help.
But they keep denying me.
I'm going to say that's very odd. Do you ever require? I'm being nice. In case there's any Department of Health and Human Services people listening, have you ever tried going to hearing? You have 90 days from your denial.
Yes, on the phone. Yes, they did it at home on the phone, and I was nervous and scared, and they asked me, questions, and they asked me, do you need help with feeding and toileting and all that? And I'm like, yes, because there literally is times where I have to be hand-fed and all that.
And
so I definitely do.
And you had somebody come out to the house from DHS? You had somebody from DHHS come out and assess you and how much help you need, correct?
Yes, and I answered all the questions, and I said yes, at the times where, I'm paralyzed, yes, I do need that help.
I have no idea why you're denied. You seem like a prime candidate for it. And the hearing officer denied you.
Yes, on the phone, because of my seizures and I can't get there. They did it at home by the phone.
Well, okay, even if you go to the office, the hearing officer, unless you ask for a face-to-face hearing at a local DHHS office, it's going to be on the phone. But you got a written decision. I know we're talking detail here in front of a bunch of people, but you got a written decision. It should be very specific.
I can give you my phone number if you want to talk to me.
It should be very specific, the hearing officer's decision as to why you were denied. And
they just said no ADLs, but I do need help with ADLs. But
so here could be the issue. Just to jump in here, with conversion disorder, it can be episodic. So, and true with psychogenic non-epileptic seizures. So it's possible that, that it didn't meet some threshold for how often it happens. Is that possible? Or when they did the assessment, maybe you were having a good day and that affected their decision? Is that, Tom, does that sound like a possibility? Or
It sounds like a possibility, but black and white, you either need the help or you don't need the assistance or don't need the assistance. Did you have
and I've got proof.
You didn't have an advocate with you. Did you have, you were on the telephone. Did you have a witness, an expert witness with you that knows your medical backwards, for a social worker or somebody that could testify on your behalf?
No.
Well, that's lawyer boy and me talking. The more I would absolutely. What county do you live in?
I live in Genesee County, so I put it in with legal aid over a month ago, and I gave them papers and everything, and it's been over a month sitting with legal aid, and I call and nobody returns my calls, and nothing's happening.
Yeah, I don't really know that they help out in this sort of a situation, but in your county, Russ, trying to put you on the spot now, does your agency provide advocacy in terms of helping somebody with a home help denial?
Cindy could help with that, and now that we know that you're trying specifically to get chore services and hearing from you, Tom, that she should be eligible for that, that would
I'm mind-boggled that she's been denied.
Yeah, that would be helpful for us. Now that we know that, we can certainly work with you, Kim, to try and get that resolved. So. Okay.
Yep. It's really individualized, that's for sure. I'm not a private practicing attorney, so believe me, I got enough to do in Oakland County. Sorry. And we don't have a chapter in Genesee County either. But hopefully Russ's group can provide some assistance to you.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Other questions?
What's in the bank?
Yeah, my name is Matthew Miller.
Yep.
And I was just wondering, you said SSDI. What does the I stand for?
Insurance, Social Security Disability Insurance.
Okay.
It's actually it's actually part of what is known as RSDI, Retirement Survivors Disability Insurance. So the subgroup in this case would be the disability part.
Well, I'm on disability.
Okay.
But you said if, like, your parents or something that was working.
Are you on Social Security disability because of your own work record?
Yes.
Okay, so you're not eligible then for your parents' work record.
Okay.
Yeah, that's reserved. Go ahead.
I worked from, well, I would say from 83 to 2004.
Okay, and if it was steady work and all that.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to be eligible to get Social Security disability as a DAC, a disabled adult child of a parent, because you've had too much of a work history.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Other questions?
Hey, Russ, this is a cool medium. It's not as hard as I thought it was going to be. Usually I'm standing in front of a group with a PowerPoint slide behind me, and I'm talking away and answering questions. So.
Right. Just to remind people, if you are trying to ask a question, remember to dial *6 first because you're muted. So anyone else who has a question, just dial *6 and you can ask away.
Hi, this is the other Sue.
Okay.
I have a question. I have a brother that has epilepsy, and it took us probably 4 or 5 years to get him Social Security disability. Back in the day when and it was difficult. I couldn't get him Social Security, SSI or
Yes.
Medicaid, because they didn't give it to single male adults at that time. Anyway, so long and behold, he's got his SSD, and he's doing well. In the last, I want to knock on wood, about 1 year and 3/4, he's been seizure-free for the first time in 14 years. And he is itching to go back to work. He's going to be 59 this year. Excuse me. He wants to go back to his previous work. But I'm worried about him losing his disability and not being able to function in that job.
Okay. He is anybody, your brother, but anybody who's on Social Security disability is allowed, and the system encourages him to go back to work. Again, the threshold is if he grosses more than $1,180, he loses his benefit. Now, keep in mind there's something called the trial work period under Social Security disability. A trial work period, yet another acronym, TWP, but a trial work period is a 9-month period of time where essentially he can earn anything he wants to try work and still get his Social Security benefit coming in.
Okay.
And the 9 months can be consecutive or non-consecutive. So if he uses up his 9 months of the trial work period, then it's an all or nothing. If he's grossing more than $1,180 or whatever the number happens to be for that year, he gets no benefit at all. If he gets that job, makes more than $1,180 a month, uses up his trial work period, can he come back to Social Security disability benefits? Yes, he can. And there's a time period, it's been a while since I did. I think it's 36 months, so 3 years, where if he fails at the work or can't work because of his disability, can he get back on benefits? Yes, without going through all the proving again. Yes.
No, that's within 36 months.
Right. He's coming up on, he's 59, you said, so 3 years from now he's going to be eligible for Social Security retirement on his own work record anyway.
Right, but
and that's just regular pension.
He just really wants to return to his previous work, which is pretty elaborate work. Do you think, would it be all right? Can I make an appointment to have him come talk to you about the options? Because he believes that even if he gets returned to work, then no one's going to let him drive and nobody's going to let him operate certain machinery and stuff like that. so that he can understand the whole picture of.
Well, again, the ARC, does he have a? It doesn't sound like he has an intellectual or a cognitive impairment.
Memory issues.
Well,
but that's all I see.
Okay, I know. I hate using the phrase, but does he have mental retardation?
No.
Okay, so that's not my agency. I'm asked to be a speaker today, but my agency serves people with intellectual impairments, formerly known as mental retardation.
Oh, okay.
There's got to be. What county do you live in?
He lives in Oakland County now.
He's in Oakland
yeah.
County.
Mm-hmm.
He can call me. I mean, he's going to ask me questions about work and how much he can make and all that sort of thing. Is that what you're looking for?
Well, no, I'm more of, does he need to have like an OT evaluation to see if he could do that type of work here? I'm wondering if, like, he worked for the big three in the auto industry in a high-profile job, very technical skilled, and he was very good at it. And of course, that was his identification of himself.
If he could get that job, it's going to pay him a lot of money, I assume.
Absolutely.
Okay, so his Social Security benefit's going to go away, 9 months or not.
Sure. Sure, and I have no problem with that, but I'm wondering, would they be able to, if the doctor said you can do this, but you can't operate certain machinery, about applying for the job with restrictions under the ADA? I mean, if he could say, well, I can do this, but I can't work the saw.
Well, the Americans with Disabilities Act does not guarantee someone employment. No. It's a fallacy, a myth, okay? It's up to the employer to, number one, want to employ him and then provide accommodations.
Right.
Like not operating a particular saw or something like that. You know, he's got the ability to go to Michigan Rehabilitation Services, right. The MRS office. They're going to know these things. Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Right. They can kind of do an evaluation of his ability, kind of go through what the job duties would be, and you know, presumably a fair amount of time has passed since he used to work there. You know, what has changed in terms of technologies and that type of thing that he might need to know, so they can help him work through those things. And I'd also be happy to talk with him too, just because we do have a lot of experience in dealing with requesting accommodations and considerations of whether or not you disclose or when you disclose your epilepsy and that type of thing. So I'm happy to talk with him about that, or with you.
Yeah, and also Russ, you can provide more detail, but is it second injury certification? So if the employer is worried about workers' compensation rates going through the roof and all that stuff, MRS you can get that second injury certification where it leaves the employer off the hook for that if you get injured due to that disability. So there are things that MRS can help with, and it sounds like Russ can help with too.
Right. Okay, perfect, great. Okay.
Yeah, you don't need an advocate person like me in this particular case.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have time for maybe one more question.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Go ahead.
I'm here. Our son is 23, so we're looking at, he has epilepsy. However, I would say his issues right now are more cognitive. And so we're looking, you gave us a lot of great information tonight. It's a little overwhelming, but what his choices for independent living will be. And because he's 23 and still on our insurance, it sounds like this could take a long time to really get things set up.
Okay, he can be on your insurance as a parent's health insurance until he's 26.
Right. So I don't want to look at this then, or how long is it going to take me to set it up? When do I start looking into all this?
Well, a couple other things. Does he have a high school diploma? Is he going to college or what?
He does. So he actually went through MRS. He went to MCTI, and he has been working the past 3 months, up to 26 hours, the part-time, and which is wonderful. So a couple of things you mentioned, like the freedom to work, Medicaid, something like that. So I don't think he'll be able to to, supplement his own living based on this kind of hours. That's about as much as he can work.
But if he works himself off of SSI, as I said, if he works himself off of SSI, as I said, there's freedom to work Medicaid, which is part of the Medicaid expansion, dare I say, the Obamacare stuff, okay? If the Medicaid expansion goes away, then so does that freedom to work Medicaid. Your question then for me is what again?
So is when do I really need to start looking into, if I want to get I want to see what his future is going to be like. What is he going to need financially, and how is he going to live independently? And so all of these great things that you gave us tonight, and you can apply for something and be denied. So when should I be looking into this if he is currently on our insurance right now until he's 26?
Well, you said he's on SSI as well, right?
He's not. No, we haven't done anything. And my first question is, where in the heck would I begin?
All right. He applies for, you can help him, but he applies for SSI at a Social Security office.
Mm-hmm.
Now, rather than going there, taking a number, waiting 2 hours, and then they'll make an appointment for you a couple weeks later, you can call a toll-free number, Social Security's hotline, 1-800-772-1213. 1-800-772-1213. That's where you begin to apply for supplemental security income. Is he his own guardian?
No. He is really, he lives with us. He's totally under our care and on our insurance. So would we be denied anything because he's still qualified under our health?
Excuse me. Have you gone to the probate court and got a guardianship for him?
No, I know nothing. I don't even know what to do.
Okay. So he's his own guardian. So when he calls the Social Security number to start applying for SSI, which it sounds like he should, he needs to be there to make that call and talk to the worker because he's his own guardian. You can help him, but he needs to make that call.
Okay. Well, that does bring me to another question, which is, in terms of Anthony, with low processing and memory, et cetera, and how I find people treat me as though I'm a helicopter parent, and when he really needs help processing all this information. So what do I need to have the right to help him through this?
Well, you can help him as mom. There's no problem doing that. I, as a third party, could help him do that. I don't have legal standing to act in place of him, but alongside him, you can help him. Applying for the SSI is that 1-800 number. Be alongside him. When you go to the Social Security office and he gets SSI, they will make you, I would assume, the representative payee for his money. So then you are in charge of his monies. There are things you can do to help him along the way.
Okay.
But going out and getting a guardianship, that's taking rights away. Another way, as I mentioned earlier, is a power of attorney, is where your son, Anthony, is it? He can sign a piece of paper called a power of attorney giving you the rights to help make decisions for him.
Okay.
Outside
that would have to be a lawyer, or is that something you can do?
A lawyer would have to draw up a power of attorney, sure, yes.
Okay. All right. And just a simple question, that frustration we're dealing with transportation. So he is obviously ADA qualified for SMART, but we seem to be in this little pocket area, either too far or too close to a fixed bus route. So we've had to Uber him quite a bit, and of course it's costly. Are there other options out there besides SMART?
Well, what city do you live in?
We're in Farmington Hills, and he works right on the border between here and West Bloomfield.
Then you know, obviously, the limitations of the southeastern Michigan, ability?
Suburban mobility.
There you go.
Whatever. Smart.
the smart bus. So you know the limitations it has. But when some of the municipalities, and I believe Farmington does, but typically it's for seniors buses, Dial-A-Ride is, in Rochester they call it the Older Persons Commission, the OPC bus. It can only go within the confines of, say, Rochester. It can only go within the confines of Farmington, Farmington Hills. That's another transportation alternative to paying a cab or an Uber or Lyft, which is expensive. So
So there's not another, like, van service or anything like that that would take people to work or that
yes, that's what I'm talking about. Your individual, I'm going to Google it while we're talking, see if I can find it. But your Farmington might have.
Well, I'll tell you this. I work at Farmington Hills in the senior center, and our smart bus, I asked my boss if he could get a ride to work, and she said we don't transport people to work. They're doing medical appointments, of course, and bringing people to the center. And so I didn't know if that was something to push through with ADA, because it seems like he should have the right.
Well, the smart bus is different than what I'm talking. The senior transportation, the city of Farmington Hills, that's different than SMART. You work for the city, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, it's senior transportation, adults 55 or better, but also includes disabilities. At the Caustic Center, I'm looking right at the brochure right now.
There's just something about this area where we live, and I've called ADA several times, and I just don't understand it. It's like if you live within 3/4 or farther away than 3/4 from a big fixed bus route, you can't get a ride, and I just can't understand it.
And those are the limitations of the funding that SMART gets. I mean, we've been tearing our hairs out for years with that.
So Uber it is.
An area that does not have public transportation for the most part, basically.
All right, gotcha.
Sorry about that, but check with your seniors center and see if there's something separate from SMART that would work within Farmington Hills.
Okay. Okay, so as far as he goes, so I want to start with SSI, and there's nothing like no one's going to say to me, well, he's still covered under your insurance, so you don't need to worry about this right now.
No. The fact that he has private health insurance has nothing to do with his receipt of SSI.
Okay.
And Medicaid, no, doesn't.
Okay.
All right.
Well, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. We're going to have to wrap it up because we're a little over our time, but thank you so much, Tom, for your wealth of knowledge is stunning to me, so I appreciate you sharing some of it with us today. So
it just means I'm old.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And again, if people have follow-up questions or need additional information on epilepsy, please feel free to visit our website at epilepsymichigan.org or call us at 1-800-377-6226. Tom also provided the information for ARC of Oakland County, and there are other ARC agencies throughout the state as well. So, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. Everyone have a great evening, okay?
All right.
Thank you both.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.